This podcast is sponsored by nobody. Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today I will be welcoming Christina Rice. Christina has written books about some Hollywood legends. Anna Vorich, a very obscure old Hollywood actress that is starting to become a little more known thanks to Christina. And Jane Russell, who's going to be the focus of today's conversation. Yes, the big-breasted, gorgeous brunette who, of course, starred in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes with Marilyn Monroe. It celebrates its 70th anniversary, and we're going to have a great conversation about that today and Jane's life, from RKO Pictures with Howard Hughes to Gentlemen Prefer Blondes to her outspoken political beliefs, which I do not agree with. And also, too, I've looked at Christina's website. She's a Guns N' Roses fan like I am. And she also met Carrie Fisher once at a Comic-Con. I want to ask her about that. And it's going to be a great conversation, and I can't wait. Also, happy birthday to the little man himself, Danny DeVito. Need I say more? The guy's a legend. Taxi, Romancing the Stone, Jewel of the Nile, Ruthless People, Twins, Junior, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Everybody knows who Danny DeVito is, so happy birthday to Danny DeVito. Just a funny, talented man. And there are no small actors, there are only big actors, though he is small in stature. So yeah, here is my interview with Christina Rice. Hey, Christina, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. This is a great honor. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
My pleasure.
So, before we get into Jane, let's start with your background. You are a librarian and an archivist of old Hollywood. What was the first classic movie you saw that had an impact on you?
So the first movie I saw that had an impact on me would have been Gone with the Wind. So I was in the first grade. It was on network TV, because I've been around for a while.
Yeah.
So it would have been shown in two parts on consecutive nights. My mom made me watch it. I absolutely did not want to. And the second I saw Vivian Leigh, I was captivated. I only saw the first hour of the night, so I didn't even see the whole movie, but absolutely fell in love with it. And I have been a classic film fan ever since.
Wow. Yeah, I got to watch Cinemax at the tail end of them showing black and white movies from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. That's where it started with me. It started a little bit before that with just having Wizard of Oz on home video, though,
Oh, yeah, Wizard of Oz. Oh, yeah, when it used to be broadcast annually was such a big deal that my parents didn't even buy the VHS for us when it first came out because it was still being broadcast once a year, and they wanted it to be special. So it took a while before I even had the VHS copy of it.
I know there's like a whole Wikipedia entry of the history of the Wizard of Oz being broadcast on CBS and Turner and all of that stuff. It's pretty incredible how long they've been running it for, annually and stuff. What are some of your favorites from the golden era?
Well, as I mentioned, like Gone with the Wind is so Vivian Leigh is one of my absolute favorite actresses, and I remember going back to Cinemax. I remember that was where I saw Waterloo Bridge with her and Robert Taylor for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But my absolute love is an actress from the 30s and 40s named Anne Dvorak.
Yep.
And so I've been collecting on her for over 25 years now. I think it's safe to say I have the world's biggest Anne Dvorak collection.
Yeah.
And I did write a book on her, which came out like 10 years ago now. So Anne is my absolute love. So Brianna Matt, Scarface, and Heat Lightning. So I adore Anne. Marilyn Monroe is also a really big influence on me from the time I was really young. And the Marx Brothers, I think, are probably my favorite actors collectively.
Oh, yeah. Love the Marx Brothers. Tell me, though, do you like the Paramount movies better than the MGM? Because some people are fundamentalists when it comes to the Paramount era.
Yes, I absolutely favor the Paramount era. They're so unhinged and so wacky, and I can absolutely watch the MGM films, but, Irving Thalberg really refined them
Yeah.
for A Night at the Opera, and it did translate into box office, so he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
He really kind of went with that formula for the rest of their careers. But no, I love Unhinged, Marx Brothers with Zeppo during the Paramount era is key for me.
I just interviewed Irving Thalberg's granddaughter, Deborah Thalberg, and she's very proud to be associated with his legacy.
Oh, absolutely. It is a tremendous legacy. So he was certainly somebody who knew what he was doing. Absolutely.
Yes, and he passed way too soon. Just think of the great movies that could have been made with his name on it, Where are you from originally?
So I did grow up I grew up in Southern California. So I grew up in a suburb called Glendora,
Mm-hmm.
but it's maybe about 20 miles east of Los Angeles. So I definitely consider myself a Los Angeles girl.
And you went to San Jose State?
I went to Cal State Fullerton is where I got my undergraduate degree, and I majored in film. And then I got my master's degree from San Jose State, although I've never set foot on the campus because it was a remote program.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in San Mateo, so I know the Bay Area like the back of my hand. Did you ever go to the Stanford Theater?
I never have.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can't believe it's still around after 60 years. I love it. The only thing I don't like is they show the same dozen movies from each person that they're having a festival from. They never do anything new. It's always the same four Cary Grant movies or Jimmy Stewart, Alfred Hitchcock. I wish they'd show William Holden, Ava Gardner, Frederick March, somebody else. I don't know. But they opened again after lockdown and stuff, so they're still around. I hope they're around a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So your authorship started with the bio about Anne Vorek, which was successful. What made you want to write Mean, Moody, Magnificent Jane Russell and the Marketing of a Hollywood Legend?
Yeah, so the book on Anne was truly a labor of love, and I worked on it for probably about 15 years, and so it was it was a learning experience, and it was a lot of work. And once I finished it, I was determined to never write another Hollywood bio again. But then kind of like childbirth, after I was a little bit removed from it, I thought, I really like having this book that I wrote. And so I started, considering who I might write about. And so I contacted my publisher, University Press of Kentucky, and they said, other than Jane's autobiography that she wrote in the mid-'80s, nobody has written about Jane, which really surprised me because, she is somebody who, from that era, that has a lot of name recognition. She was very heavily documented, because she was under the thumb of Howard Hughes for so long. And so, Anne Dvorak was somebody where I really had to dig to find information because she wasn't, she was as documented as a movie star can be, but not to the extent as some of these other people. And Jane was somebody who was incredibly documented. And so I thought it would be, a challenge in a different way. I always loved Jane in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. I think that's one of my favorite performances of all time. But I wasn't really familiar with her filmography otherwise, other than maybe The Outlaw. And so it just sounded like a fun challenge. And I dove in and wrote a book about Jane.
Yes, I love Gentlemen Prefer Blondes too, which we'll talk about. But she was just a great screen presence, I thought, and all of these old Hollywood legends, they had problematic, political views that I don't agree with, yet they had more talent on screen than most people today. They were definitely made by the Hollywood system factories, and those people had an eye for talent, and that's why I think it's so great about Jane being a great example of that. How long did this book take to write?
This one only took about 5 years. So I managed to cut my time by a third.
Yeah. Did you talk to a lot of people that knew her and stuff?
Yeah, I did talk to some. Unfortunately, I reached out to her kids, and I never got a response from them. One of the key interview that I was able to was with a gentleman who was the executive director of WAIF, which was a foundation that Jane started and oversaw that advocated for international adoption and later for, positive laws supporting foster care. And so she would do a lot of fundraisers, and so I knew there were all these fundraisers for WAIF, and I could never wrap my head around what it actually did. And so to actually be able to sit down and spend some time talking to the guy that ran it with her was really insightful and wonderful. So that was probably my favorite interview that I did for the book.
Awesome. So yeah, getting into Jane Russell more in depth. I mean, her father was in the army, and her mother was an actress who traveled in a traveling troupe, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, her father. So during World War I, her father was, and her mom was an actress. So, didn't have a tremendous career, but had some success and traveled around, and definitely kind of projected that onto Jane when she was born. So there was a little bit of that acting in the blood in the family.
She wasn't like an army brat, though, right?
No, so her father was just in the war during World War I.
Okay.
And so once the war was over, that was the end of his military career.
And she lived a majority of her life in L.A., but didn't someone in her family, one of her parents, like live in Canada before that?
Yeah, so the family Jane's parents had lived in Canada. Even at the time that Jane was born, they were living in Canada, but her mother, Geraldine, their family had a vacation home in Minnesota, and so that's actually why Jane was born in Minnesota. So she didn't spend really much time there, but Reggie, Minnesota always loved to claim Jane as a native daughter. So she was born here in the United States, even though her parents were actually living in Canada at the time. But they did relocate to Southern California when Jane was about 2 or 3 years old, so really young. So Jane absolutely grew up in Southern California, primarily in the San Fernando Valley.
Wow. I like that term, native daughter. I never heard that before.
Yeah.
I found an almost kindred spirit thing when I found out that she was a tomboy and she grew up with all brothers. My dad's sister, my aunt, was the oldest and only girl of 6 kids, and she was definitely a tomboy. Yeah, Jane definitely struck me as somebody who didn't mind rolling up her sleeves and getting dirty.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, I think she was the oldest and had the 4 younger brothers. They really, I think they certainly kept her grounded even after she became a glamorous movie star. They never allowed her to take herself seriously.
Oh, that's great. So she started modeling and studying acting with Max Reinhardt, like in her teens.
So after she got out of high school, and again, she always, Jane is so interesting because she was never particularly ambitious. When opportunity came her way, she would roll with it and take advantage of it. And so after she graduated from high school, she didn't study with Max Reinhardt. She went to the Max Reinhardt School of Acting, and he worked with students that had been around for a while, so she wasn't one of them. So she got really frustrated that she wasn't working directly with him. And so the school was located right across the street from what had previously been the Warner Brothers studio on Sunset Boulevard. For years now, it's been KTLA TV. But for a brief period in the early 40s, a Warner brother-in-law turned part of the studio into a bowling alley. And so Jane would ditch her acting classes and go bowling across the street because she was kind of frustrated with it. But she did start modeling under a photographer named Tom Kelly, which Marilyn Monroe fans will recognize as the photographer who shot Marilyn's nude Golden Dreams calendar photos. So Jane was introduced by a friend, and Tom Kelly said, "Yes, you are wonderful," and taught her how to model. She never did nude modeling for him. She would do clothing modeling for some of his contracts, and he was the one who really taught her how to present herself in front of the camera with the credo, if it's not uncomfortable and awkward, it's going to be a lousy photo. So she really learned how to pose because of Tom Kelly, and so she always really credited. And a photo of hers was hanging up in his studio, and that's how the agent Levis Green discovered her, which led to her starting in the movies. But again, it wasn't anything she super pursued, but it all just kind of found her. But she was gorgeous. She was made to be in front of the camera.
Hmm. And also too, just like any guy, I mean, I'm fascinated by her bust line, and this was during a time when breast implants didn't exist. Do you know if she developed early or she bloomed late, and do you know if she inherited it by her mother or somebody?
Gosh, I never really considered if she inherited it from her mother, but certainly by the time, even though she was a tomboy, she certainly started, yeah, she certainly developed. You see the photos of her when she's in high school, and she's really very much Jane Russell from a fairly young age. So, so she did develop pretty early on. But ironically, the photo that was discovered by that agent wasn't even a photo of her body. It was a photo, a very tight close-up of her face, where she was almost snarling. And that was the photo that this agent saw and was instantly enamored with.
Yeah, that was kind of her look, the snarl.
Yes.
Yeah, Bob Hope called her the two and only.
Yeah.
That guy was a wit, I'll tell you. So Howard Hughes discovered her and signed her to RKO.
Yeah, so actually it was Howard Hawks, the director. So originally when The Outlaw was in pre-production, it was going to be produced by Howard Hughes and it was going to be directed by Howard Hawks.
Okay.
So they had worked together in the early 30s very successfully with the original Scarface with Paul Muni and George Raft and Anne Dvorak. And so they decided to collaborate again. And so it was Howard Hawks who, saw the photo, brought her in for a screen test, and cast her. However, he started butting heads with Howard Hughes shortly after production started on location in Arizona. Hughes was back here. Hawks was in Arizona, and Hughes still managed to meddle. So Hawks walked off the picture. Howard Hughes took her, and directed the picture, and that's a whole epic in itself. But at that time, Hughes had not assumed control of RKO, but he did assume control of Jane. So he signed her, to one of the kind of standard 7-year contracts. And so when he did have the controlling interest in RKO in the late 40s, then he brought Jane over and started casting her in the films there. But she was never under contract to RKO. She was always exclusively under contract to the Hughes Tool Company, which was his business.
Yeah, and obviously Hawks believed in her and never forgot her, because then a decade later came Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. But wow, I didn't even know about Hawks almost involved with The Outlaw. That's pretty interesting. I'm curious to know, did her and Hughes ever have an affair?
They actually did not. So Jane, at a fairly young age, started dating Robert or Bob Waterfield, who was a quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams. They didn't date in high school. They started dating after he had graduated. So she was always, I think, very protected from kind of the quote-unquote wolves of Hollywood, because she was with this football player. Mm-hmm. And so he was always respected that. I think he made a pass at her like once. She was like, "Howard, what are you doing?" Yeah. So ultimately, the two of them had, they certainly butted heads professionally at times, but they also had very much mutual respect for each other. Mm-hmm. She was very loyal to him professionally, and he always appreciated that. And so ultimately, I do honestly believe that it was one of the more genuine and positive, friendships that Howard Hughes had during the course of his life, was with Jane.
Yeah, and he was with Terry Moore, who I've interviewed her son Grant Kramer from Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's so cool. Yeah, I mean, in the business, those kind of friendships are rare. Now, her first movie, of course, The Outlaw, had a trailer that was controversial because of her cleavage. Is that when Hughes came up with the idea for her special bra?
So he, supposedly designed this aerodynamic bra because what he hoped to accomplish was to make it look like she was not wearing a bra. Mm-hmm. He just didn't want the seams to be seen under her clothing. So he designed something. She put it on, thought it was flimsy and ridiculous. So she actually took it off, threw it across her dressing room, just put her regular bra on, and just kind of put Kleenex. Mm-hmm. Down her top to cover the seams. and nobody ever knew the difference. So there's always the legend of the bra, which Jane always said was absolute hogwash. But the marketing campaign around the Outlaw, which was the architect of that was Russell Birdwell, who was a legendary publicist, and he had done the Search for Scarlet campaign that had kept Gone with the Wind in the headlines for years before it came out. He was hired by Howard Hughes to manage the campaign for the Outlaw. And so that's where we get, Mean, Moody, Magnificent was one of the advertisements, where I got the title for my book, and, would you like to tussle with Russell, and, along with a lot of other things. And so ultimately, I think that, the Outlaw as a film has not stood the test of time, but that advertising campaign of Jane, lounging on bales of hay in a very low-cut dress with a gun has certainly stood the test of time. And, people who've never seen The Outlaw, are aware of it because of those advertisements all these years, 80 years later.
Yeah, I think an interviewer asked her once, what do you want your legacy to be? And she said something like, I sold a lot of bras.
Yeah. She did well, and she was the spokesperson for Playtex bras in the 70s and 80s. So, just once again demonstrating that, Jane never took herself that seriously and could definitely be tongue-in-cheek.
And it was also a very groundbreaking in feminism. This was, this is like probably 15 years later after the whole cigarettes, torches of freedom, Edward Bernays, feminism BS that had happened. It was pretty cutting edge at the time. One of my favorites that she did was His Kind of Woman with Robert Mitchum, which was a noir, and it was the first of two movies she made with him. The other was, I can't even pronounce it, Macao. Yeah, and they seem to have a very strong, almost flirtatious relationship on screen. Was there more, or they were just friends?
No, it's totally speculative. There maybe might have been more. It wouldn't surprise me if there were. In her autobiography, she does reference an affair that she had while she was married to Robert Waterfield. She refers to the man as Lance. And so myself and there was a fellow, a Jane Russell fan who I became friends with while writing the book, and he thought Lance was Robert Mitchum. So, we don't know for sure, but I think it's entirely possible. They might have. But they did have undeniable chemistry on screen, and even if they didn't have an affair, they were actually very good friends, off screen. So that was incredible chemistry off screen, on screen and off screen, and I think it's kind of a drag they only made the two movies together because they're really fantastic together.
Oh yeah, I think they could have been a Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. They could have kept going. They could have done comedies, all that stuff. I remember Mitchum saying years later on the Dick Cavett show that Jane used to pop her bubble gum on his nose.
Yeah, sounds like her.
Yeah, and he was, and Cavett was like, "Oh, she was here the other night. I could have asked her that." So let's talk about Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, because it's the 70th anniversary, and I've always thought that in hindsight this movie kind of gets a little diminished because it's got kind of a sexist title, and the fact that Madonna satirized it in the Material Girl video, it's become legend from that. But I think it's such a fantastic, well-made musical, and this was a huge studio picture by 20th Century Fox. Whereas she was doing a lot of B-movie stuff over at RKO. Did she see it as a breakthrough for her?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this was, ultimately this would be her favorite movie. Yeah, and it's probably one of her most high budget films. So, yeah, and even though she technically, wasn't the star of it, she absolutely wanted to do it. Howard Hawks, was set to direct it, and he was, working with Daryl Zanuck to try to figure out who would star in it, and Hawks advocated for Marilyn, who was definitely on the rise at Fox at the time, hadn't completely broken out yet. Mm-hmm. And he said, you have this girl who would be perfect for this role, and Zanuck was hedging on it, and Hawks said, if you have somebody in the supporting role, the secondary role of Dorothy Shaw, if you have somebody strong who can kind of help prop Marilyn up, it'll work, and I know exactly who that is, and it's and it's Jane Russell. And Zanuck said, Howard Hughes is never going to let us borrow her. And Hawks said, really, you don't think so? He called Jane up and said, Jane, I have a movie for us. And Jane just said yes, because she had always regretted not being able to work with him on The Outlaw after he had discovered her. So Jane didn't even care, and Hawks told her, there's the other character of Lorelei Lee, whoever plays this, it was really going to kind of be the spotlight of the movie. And she said, I don't care, just tell me when to show up. And so, because Jane was such a big star at the time, the character of Dorothy Shaw was beefed up, so it was made into a bigger role. Jane does get top billing in the film, but it was an incredible opportunity for her, and Marilyn was an absolute breakout role for Marilyn. And in addition to The Outlaw, I think it's one of the big reasons why people are very hyper aware of Jane still to this day is because of that film.
Yeah, and also too, it was an important movie for Hawks because he was known for mostly doing westerns. I think the only comedy he had made up to that point was Bringing Up Baby. There may have been maybe another, but these two.
Yeah, his Girl Friday.
His Girl Friday, yes, and he did the original Scarface, so he was known for more dramatic stuff. But this was kind of out of left field for him because it was a musical comedy, It
was, although he was not comfortable directing the musical numbers. So Jack Cole, who was the choreographer on the film, he was the one who actually directed the musical numbers. So I think it's interesting because Hawks was a pretty arrogant guy, and I think had every right. Personally my favorite director, and I think it's interesting that he had enough self-awareness that he felt like he couldn't effectively direct the musical numbers and was comfortable turning that over to Jack Cole to do.
Yeah, and also too, his wife Slim, who was the bassist for Lauren Bacall's character in The Big Sleep, which is my favorite noir of all time. Her cousin is the '80s child actress Holly Fields, and she's a good friend of mine.
Oh, wonderful! Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of Howard Hawks. I think he's wonderful. But you see how how he could just get such incredible performances. Because I think Jane's always pretty solid in most of her, like some of the The Outlaw's a little sketchy. Later on, she comes into her own. But in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she is just flawless. She is perfect in that film, as is Marilyn.
Yeah, and then I think the media tried to concoct a feud between the two of them, but they were actually buddies on set, right?
Yeah, the media did try to concoct the girls catfighting, which was absolutely untrue. They got along really well, and again, I think Hawks. He had already directed Marilyn in Monkey Business with Cary Grant and Ginger Rogers, and so he was familiar with Marilyn. I think he was familiar with her insecurities, and so that was he deliberately wanted Jane because he knew Jane just wasn't egotistical. Jane was somebody who was incredibly comfortable in her own skin and was not threatened by other actresses, and so he knew that Jane would be able to, she wouldn't be threatened by Marilyn. She would be able to really guide her along, and that's what happened. And early on in filming, Marilyn, because Marilyn would always get to the studio at the crack of dawn, and it would take hours to put her makeup on, do her hair and makeup. Jane, on the other hand, was somebody who really valued sleep, and so Jane would roll into the studio at the last possible minute. She would do her own makeup in the car, and then her makeup guy would kind of touch her up. So Jane would roll in at the last minute. But Marilyn, because she was so nervous, she knew this film was a really big opportunity, but her nerves and her anxiety really tended to get the best of her. And so her makeup artist, Whitey Snyder, started to notice, oh God, Marilyn's starting to go onto the set later and later, and he knew it would be a problem. And so he went to Jane's makeup artist, the guy Shotgun Britain, so all these makeup guys had great names, went to Shotgun and said, hey, I think we're going to start having problems with Marilyn. Is there anything that maybe Jane can do to help? And so Jane just said, oh, sure. And so every morning, as soon as Jane was ready to go on set, she would walk past Marilyn's dressing room, knock on the door, and say, hey, Blonda, let's go. And Marilyn would pop out and go, okay, and they would walk onto the set together. So, I know there's stories of actresses, not wanting to be the first one. They had to be the last one to arrive. Jane just didn't care. Jane knew this was a great opportunity. She wanted it to work. And so she always was just so kind to Marilyn, made sure she got to the set on time. If Marilyn would have trouble understanding what Hawks wanted from her, Jane would be there to like kind of interpret and guide her. And so what we end up with is what I consider to be the best buddy picture ever made.
Oh, it's definitely in the top 100. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the books of April Viviv. She's written books about all the blonde bombshells in Hollywood. I've had 2 conversations with her, one about Marilyn, one about Jane Mansfield, and I'm gonna ask her to come back on for a Betty Grable one next year. And I was reading that Betty Grable was actually offered to play Marilyn's role, but something happened.
Yeah, I think originally it was Betty Grable, and I think they were considering Ginger Rogers for the Jane Russell role. And then that just, for whatever reason, that ended up not happening.
I think that having 2 blondes in the same movie would have been too much. I think they're just perfect the way they are, one brunette and one blonde, you know?
Yeah, it is. I think it's a perfect movie.
I read something hilarious. When Jane falls into the pool after the "There Ain't Anyone Here for Love" sequence, there was an accident that she fell into the pool, and Howard Hawks laughed during dailies and kept it in.
She's not, and you watch it, like, you can tell she's not expecting it. So, she ducks down, and then all the Olympic athletes, jump over her to jump in the pool, and one of them knocks her in. Mm-hmm. And Jane said that was done, like, on a Friday, and then the next week they reshot it. And she said, why are we reshooting this? You're going to end up using the one where I get knocked in the pool, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and she's such a pro. I mean, she kept it going, she probably figured that it was probably going to be used, so she just, kept it, in character there. And that whole scene in general is pretty risque because, for its time, because all those muscleheads were like, barely, almost naked,
Yeah. It is. It's a very, it's a pretty homoerotic number. And later on, I think, when the film, if I'm remembering correctly, I think in Britain it was cut out of the theatrical release, and then I think sometimes when it would air on television here in the U.S., that number sometimes got cut out as being too risque.
Yeah. Do you know if Jane was comfortable though doing the singing and dancing sequences? Do you know if she was classically trained at all?
She wasn't classically trained, but she loved. Like Jane, she loved to sing and dance, and she knew she wasn't like much of a dancer, but she absolutely loved performing, loved singing. I think even more than acting, she loves it. So she started recording like in the 1940s. I think Kay Kaiser brought her on his radio show, and then she started recording albums in the 1940s. So she recorded, for the 40s, 50s. 60s, she would perform on stage, and at one point, one of her contracts with Howard Hughes had it written in that she could have time off to travel and do live performances, and she ended up at the end of her life, when she was living in Santa Maria, at a hotel, she thought, this town, there's nothing for the old people to do, and so she did a cabaret act at a hotel, and she was doing that, I think, right up to like a week before she died. So she absolutely loved to sing and dance and was super comfortable doing that in front of the camera as well. Absolutely loved it.
She looks like she could have been a natural born pole dancer,
Possibly.
Now after that movie, I mean, she kept working. She did The Tall Men with Clark Gable, Run for the Sun with Richard Widmark, Gentlemen Marry Brunettes, Fate is the Hunter with Glenn Ford, great underrated disaster flick. But did she stop caring about her career after a while, or did like her political views get in the way of her getting better roles because of the changing of the times of Hollywood going liberal?
No, I don't think it didn't have anything really to do with her politics. I think she's, she was getting older, and Hollywood doesn't always like an older actress. So I think that was part of it. I think she just ended up getting, I think, a little burned out and was just kind of over it. So, but she did keep on performing. So she would do stage performances. So she did a lot of summer stock. She only did Broadway once and thought that was a little bit too grueling. But she did enjoy doing summer stock. She did a little bit of television, but she did the live performing. So I think she enjoyed that a lot more. So she started performing with Connie Haynes and Beryl Davis, and and Jane was very, she had very strong faith. So they started like a Christian trio, and they sometimes would have like Della Russell or Rhonda Fleming, and so they recorded like kind of like Christian gospels, but like pop versions of it, and they traveled around the world performing. And so I think she ultimately enjoyed that a lot more. And the other thing is, she was, at one point she ended up signing, like in the 50s, she signed a 20-year contract with Howard Hughes, and where she got $1,000 a week, whether she worked or not, and he paid her that whole time. So, so she has this like reliable chunk of money. So, why go break yourself trying to get these Hollywood roles? You can just, when you have this money coming in. So, yeah, she did a smattering of roles in the 60s, but, I think she was just kind of, done and didn't want to hustle. And again, it is, harder for older actresses to get good parts.
Absolutely. I mean, she was in Tom Laughlin's The Born Losers. I can't imagine the two of them getting along very well, because Laughlin was very liberal. He was very hot-headed. He cared for the plight of the Native American Indians, but he was a difficult man. Do you know anything about that?
She's only in, it's just like kind of one brief scene. So, they ended up not even really, working. So I haven't heard anything about them butting heads. And I think she became much more politically boisterous, like much later on. So she was always conservative and, again, like very, very religious. But I think, any comments she made that were considered inflammatory came much, much later on. Overall, I've never really heard of anybody not getting along with her. She seemed like she was somebody, who was really easy to get along with. She didn't seem to be a judgmental person and just usually accepted people where they were at. And, as I mentioned, she had her organization, WAIF, which, advocated for international adoption, and she didn't care what anybody's political beliefs were as long as they were donating money to that cause. So she wasn't somebody that lived like in a political bubble and wouldn't fraternize, because she was friends with lots of people in Hollywood, and a lot of them were liberal. So I think if she were around now, her political beliefs would probably
get her canceled.
Yeah, I don't know how well they would go over now, but no, at the time, the conservatives and the liberals seem to be able to get along a lot better.
Oh, absolutely. Back then, everybody got along with each other a lot better on both sides, and it was so friendly.
Yeah.
It was so much more civil than it is today. Yeah. And I think at that time, too, once the liberals in Hollywood started becoming more outspoken, people like her and John Wayne and whoever else, they were all becoming outspoken about their beliefs as well.
Yeah. But, as far as I know, I don't think she ever had issues with her co-stars, her directors. She was always a professional, and just, despite being this world-known movie star, always seems to be pretty down-to-earth and, somebody you could absolutely just kick back and have a drink with.
Yeah, she had that great quote. She said, "Publicity can be terrible, but only if you don't have any."
Yeah. Yeah, and she always, she was always, because of Howard Hughes, she was always like publicized as this absolute sex pot, which is not what she, I think she thought that was ridiculous, and that's not who she was off screen, but she knew that publicity gave her the career, and she knew that having the career, allowed her to do the things that she, allowed her to have a life that she wanted to have. And particularly once she started WAIF, she knew that having the publicity, having the name recognition, helped her with her organization, with the WAIF organization. So I always thought it was very interesting how she could absolutely separate the on-screen Jane Russell from the real life Jane Russell, and could reconcile the two, even though she didn't always agree with what Howard Hughes did, and sometimes would draw the line with him, like, Howard, you've just gone too far this time. But she could always compartmentalize the two, which I find to be fascinating.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. What was her sense of humor like? Was she bawdy, and did she swear a lot?
I think she did. Yeah, I think she did. So she was definitely a guy's gal, which is why I think she paired with people like Robert Mitchum and Clark Gable. Like it just comes off so well. So yeah, I think she again did not take herself seriously at all. Had an incredible sense of humor, and and just really got along with people. So it does seem like she was a lot of fun to be around.
Oh yeah, I'm starting to find out now that so many people from that era had potty mouths. The biggest one for me I couldn't believe was Harriet Nelson. Like you see her on Ozzie and Harriet, just so wholesome and so kind, which she was, right? But she could be in the trailer with the guys telling dick jokes and saying the F word every sentence. I was like, wow. Harriet of all people.
Yeah, I respect that. Her and Carol Lombard. But Carol Lombard was notorious for her mouth, for cursing like a sailor.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Later in life, Jane, she did a lot of TV. She was on 3 episodes of the short-lived Sybil Shepherd Western, the Yellow Rose, and then her last TV credit was an episode of Hunter. After a while, did she just retire?
Yeah, she did. She moved. She lived in Santa Barbara for a while, and then she moved to Sedona, Arizona, with her third husband. And I think they owned a bar out there. And so I think that the television, she was promoting her book. So I think that's one of the reasons why she did the episode of Hunter. So again, I don't think she financially was pretty well off, so she didn't really need to work. So I think she just would kind of show up, whenever she wanted to. She ended up having a line of clothing that she designed. So yeah, she just kind of did the things that she wanted to do. And again, ultimately completely retired or moved to Santa Maria, which is where one of her kids was living. But again, had her cabaret show and performed right up until the time that she died. So she always loved singing, absolutely adored it.
Oh, that's so awesome. So overall, what are your favorites of her movies? All of them.
So, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is absolutely the one that I love the most. And then she did one with Jeff Chandler called Foxfire.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a revelation for me. I always recommend that one to people because I think a lot of people haven't seen it. And I think it was the last movie to be filmed in the 3-strip Technicolor process. Mm-hmm. And it's just vibrant and absolutely incredible. So I always recommend that one because I'm assuming most people haven't seen it. Paleface with Bob Hope, that's her first comedy, and she's just fantastic. It's late 40s, and that's kind of Jane fully formed right there. It's oh wow, there she is, and she just has that incredible timing, and it's just an absolutely fun role. Fate is the Hunter, which you had mentioned.
Yep.
She's not in it for very long, but I think that's just such an incredible movie. I would love for people to see that. The two with Mitchum she did were great. The French Line is not a great movie, but she has a number at the end, Looking for Trouble. Mm-hmm. It actually got into a lot of trouble with the censors, but if you can see the unedited version of that dance number, it's fantastic. It is just body and awesome, and she just chews up the scenery, and she's absolutely fantastic in it.
Oh, love it. Yeah. His Kind of Woman, I love. The Las Vegas Story with Victor Mature.
Las Vegas Story is fantastic. And Las Vegas Story, it was filmed on location. So it just has great footage of Vegas in the 1950s.
Yeah, I'm Facebook friends with Victoria Mature. I've tried getting her on the podcast, but she's very shy. Hopefully, in the future, I can.
Oh, yeah.
She's actually a fan of the podcast. She loved the interview I did with Anthony Quinn's widow. She told me they're good friends. But yeah, there's also Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. I love. She did this B Western with Dana Andrews called Johnny Reno that I like.
Oh, yeah, later on. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and
she had the, and I don't know if I meant the tall men I actually absolutely love. I think her and Gable, there is a bit of an age difference, but it's not uncomfortable like it sometimes is. And the two of them have great chemistry together. They're just incredible. And Gable would call her grandma. That's what he would refer to her on set. Oh, grandma. So they're just wonderful together.
yeah, a Double Dynamite.
Groucho, yes.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra. What a weird movie.
Yeah, really weird.
Yeah. That one was kind of, I think, a waste of her talents. And Montana Belle was an early Western that she did, which is pretty dreadful, but that's the first movie that she sings in, and she does a song called The Gilded Lily, which is just a lot of fun. It's a fantastic number.
Yeah, God, that was so awesome. Yeah, so I was on your website and I looked in the musings section and I see that you're a Guns N' Roses fan like I am. What are your favorite songs from them?
Well, I know it's Crusade, but Sweet Child is my favorite song, but I knew, I started listening to Guns like when Appetite first came out, so I liked Sweet Child before most people did. Estranged is one of my other favorite songs.
Yeah.
Rocket Queen, I think Rocket Queen's probably their best song, so that's one of my favorites. Oh God, Don't Damn Me is one of my absolute favorites. Coma. So I actually they played the Hollywood Bowl a couple of weeks ago, and that was my 23rd and 24th time seeing them in concert. So.
Wow, I've never seen them live. I've come close a few times, but every time I do, they're either sold out or the ticket prices are insane.
They are insane, and that was when I got my master's degree and I became a librarian. And this was when they were very solidly broken up, and I was thought, this is good. I need to go get this professional job because if Guns N' Roses ever gets back together, I need to be able to afford to buy tickets. So that's certainly been the case. So yeah, I saw them 9 times between '88 and '93. So I got to see the original lineup with Steven Adler and Izzy Stradlin twice, and then I've seen them that many more times since since Slash and Duff and Axl got back together in 2016. So yeah, they're Ann Dvorak and Slash are my two loves.
Oh,
who I don't know personally.
I was at Monsterpalooza one year, and I found out later Slash was there, and he took a picture with the nun in The Conjuring. I was like, damn it, I didn't see Slash. I missed him, and we were there the same day.
Aww. Yeah, so when I was 17, he was near my house in Glendora filming Don't Cry, the part of the video where he drives the car off the cliff.
Yeah.
And so a friend of mine found out, and we drove up there, and so I got to meet him up on a mountaintop in the Azusa Canyon.
Wow. Yeah, Sweet Child of Mine is my dad's favorite song. When I was a kid, he had a rock band, and he would play it over and over again to learn how to play it. And he played it pretty good with his band, I have to say. And that song holds a special place in my heart. Also, Welcome to the Jungle is my absolute favorite because my wrestling team would play it during practice when we were running around the room and everything to get in shape. Yeah, they're a pretty damn good band. And it's funny, too, because my dad hated 80s metal, right? And I love it. But he hated it. But when he saw Guns N' Roses, they reminded him of all the bands that he loved in the 70s, like Sabbath and Zeppelin and all these guys who were influenced by the blues and the early punk rock. I mean, it made him love hard rock again because Motley Crue and everybody, he just absolutely despised at that time. He has a little bit of respect for them now that he's older, but back then he was like, this is stupid.
Yeah. No, yeah, and Guns N' Roses was absolutely influenced by all of those things that you mentioned. Slash was very much influenced by the blues, and of course Duff was a punk rocker. So yeah, they are amazing.
They are. And I also see that you met Carrie Fisher at a Comic-Con in the 2000s. How was that?
Oh, Oh, that was amazing for me. I saw Star Wars. I was 3 years old when Star Wars came out, and so that's really, Gone with the Wind made me love classic film, but going to see Star Wars at a theater, like, that made me love film. I think that made a huge impression, and just from the time I was little, just absolutely loved Carrie Fisher. Thought Princess Leia was just amazing, and I remember when I was in the 3rd grade, I would only answer to Carrie. I wouldn't answer to my name because I thought Carrie was so great. So when I met her, I was a little bit tongue-tied, and so it was, she was very nice, but I don't even know if I said much of anything, because, I grew up here in Los Angeles, and so you run into TV stars and film stars, you kind of see them all around, so, we consider ourselves jaded, but Carrie Fisher I was absolutely starstruck to meet her, and I'm still pretty devastated that she's no longer with us. That still makes me incredible. Like when she died and Debbie Reynolds, when we lost them back to back, like I cried so hard I popped a blood vessel in my eye. So I'm very happy that I did get to meet her that one time at San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah, I was so devastated. She was scheduled to be at the San Jose Comic-Con, and it didn't happen, unfortunately, because of her passing. But I did do a tribute podcast to her with a girl that wrote a book about her, or actually co-wrote a book about her last year for the 45th anniversary of Star Wars. And I just learned so much about her, and just what a social butterfly she was, and how dirty her mouth was,
Oh, yeah. Love her. Oh, there's so many photos of her flipping the bird, and I just love her for that.
Yeah. And I also noticed you have a line of My Little Pony comic books.
Yeah, so I was, my writing career has taken weird twists and turns, and so, after my Anne Dvorak book came out, I ended up being one of the writers of I wrote about 25 issues of My Little Pony, so that stopped. I haven't written any of those for a few years, the line, completed, but that was fun, and I got to certainly, insert kind of classic movie references, and so I have a whole issue that was kind of my tribute to the Howard Hawks film Only Angels Have Wings, which I'm sure nobody, even made that connection, but I'm very proud that I got to pay tribute to Howard Hawks in a My Little Pony comic book. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on the original My Little Pony. I was into the girl cartoons as much as I was into the guy cartoons. I loved all those toy line cartoons. I remember Robot Chicken always used to parody My Little Pony. There's this one where the channels are flipping, and you see the horse in My Little Pony like has her paw stuck in a in a trap and can't get out. And then there's another one where this little girl is arguing with the horse over its name. Your name is Ragamuffin. No, it's Pegasus. No, Ragamuffin. And then she gets a whip and starts whipping her. Yeah. I listened to an episode of your podcast, Little Miss Movies, and the Nightmare on Elm Street episode I thought was awesome. I'm a huge Freddy fan, as I'm sure you could tell by my podcast picture of me and Robert Englund. Yeah, I prefer Jason more, but Freddy I love as well. I'm glad that you're indoctrinating your daughter into horror so young, because my parents, they showed me The Shining when I was a year old, and they loved Jack Nicholson, but they stopped loving horror after the 50s and 60s, because once the blood came, they were like, oh no, this is not our thing. But I had to get into horror on my own as I got older and stuff. But I think that is so cool that you're getting her into horror. What else have you shown her?
Well, she's seen, because I love 80s horror. Once we get past that, I'm not as big a fan, but my husband is a huge horror fan. So Elm Street's my favorite. I love Nightmare on Elm Street. So she was so on that, but she has seen Halloween. So she loves Halloween. Loves Halloween 3. Mm-hmm. We have not shown her Halloween 2. So she has seen The Shining. What else have we watched with her? The Exorcist. She could not get through, so she actually walked out.
Yeah.
At one point, The Exorcist, she just stood up and she just said, "I'm out," and then she just walked away. So it's not really horror, but Jaws, I think, is her all-time favorite movie. She absolutely, she loves Jaws so much that right now she's in the 8th grade now, and she has this huge history report. And so she decided to do it on Steven Spielberg, and that is because she loves Jaws so much. And so she has seen Killer Clowns from Outer Space, so we have shown that to her.
Yep.
And she absolutely refuses to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I totally understand, because I watched it when I was her age, and I don't. And my husband loves Texas Chainsaw, and I just can't do it.
It's so mild because I don't consider it horror. I consider it just more like a grindhouse, exploitation film. Because, yeah, I mean, everything's scary when you see the family at the end in the house, right? But there's and you see the stuff on the hooks, but it's mild. There's no one getting their heads cut off or anything like that.
Yeah, but even because they don't show a lot, but I think they do. Like Tobe Hooper does a very good job of implying it so that you're seeing it. So I actually find it it makes me very uncomfortable, that movie. Because I do think it's a very good movie. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But that one's just a little bit more than I can stomach.
I totally get it. Yeah, I mean, I love the most obscure horror films in the slasher genre, especially the ones that came out in 1981. There were so many great ones that year. Other than Friday the 13th Part 2 and My Bloody Valentine, there was, Happy Birthday to Me, Bloody Birthday, Just Before Dawn, The Pit, Final Exam, and I've been lucky to talk to a lot of people from all those movies I just mentioned. Yeah, I think that was the peak year, the best year for slasher flicks.
And it's nice that there are a lot of companies that are restoring these and putting them out on DVD. So I think it's really great that a lot of these films are really accessible now too.
The Shout Factory, and I still collect VHS. I have a VCR, and I have old ancient VHS tapes that I'm looking at right now as I'm talking to you because they're my most prized possessions, and I have a lot of those movies on VHS.
Oh yeah, we cling to our VCR. We still have that, and we still buy DVDs.
I still do too. Yeah.
We do not trust the streaming companies. That these things can disappear at any time.
Yeah.
Always, buy your physical media, people.
Yeah, I'm not a big streaming guy. I mean, if something new's coming on Netflix, of course, I'll watch it because that's where it's only available. But for the old stuff, no, it's in my room, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what are some of your favorite HorrorCon experiences of people you've met?
I haven't really I don't know that I've really met too many people. I know my husband, he went to one and they met PJ Soul. I was at work. I was at work that day. So I was kind of bummed because I would love to meet PJ Soul.
She is one of my favorite people in horror that I've interviewed. Just a great person. She's incredibly busy. I've tried to get her on a second time, but that first time was fantastic. I was a terrible interviewer, and she frickin' was a great sport. She helped me through that. I mean, just awesome. That was one of my early ones, And I love PJ. Yeah, Robert Englund's great. He'll talk to everybody for 10 or 15 minutes, and I think that's at the point now where the promoters expect that. So they're just hey, it's Robert's show. Let him do what he wants. But other people, they have to follow our rules,
Yeah. Well, that's nice. I know years ago, probably 25 years ago, I met Vampira.
Yeah.
At a convention, but she wouldn't take a check, and I was out of cash, so I couldn't get her autograph.
I met Elvira a month ago at Sister Creature Con in Sacramento, and it was not the most pleasant of experiences. She tried to shoo me away, I'll tell you. And we had a plexiglass between us, both at the autograph and the photo op. And so many people I knew who worked at the place told me, there's a little bit of hierarchy there. She's just really full of herself. I'm I can kind of see it. So.
Oh, but she is amazing. I always loved Elvira.
Oh yeah, and I got her book, and I read her book, and I'm wow, she's been through a lot of stuff. But it's very apparent that she's very sensitive too. As an artist. Yeah. So are you going to do new episodes of the Little Miss movies?
Probably not. That was our pandemic project. So while we were all locked in the house together, and so and ultimately, well, I think now that my daughter's a teenager, she probably thinks she's too cool to do something with her parents.
Yeah.
And our biggest takeaway was that my husband and I, are just absolute cinephiles, and our daughter, not so much. Like, there are some movies that she really loves. Like I said, she loves Jaws. Like, she loves Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. She really likes Citizen Kane, bizarrely. But otherwise, she just really, resents us forcing her to watch movies. So Little Miss Movies is really not super, super into movies, unfortunately. So I think that was just that was our COVID thing that we did together.
Like mother, like daughter, you're passing on the latchkey kid, history there. Because I'll tell you, the younger generations, they don't know who Marlon Brando is, nor do they care. And they got the technology to find out, but they don't care. It's sad. It really is.
Yeah. So, but one of the as resistant as she sometimes can be, I think she also sees the value. So she does know who Marlon Brando is, because we did make her watch The Godfather and Streetcar Named Desire, and it was nice. She very willingly watched Streetcar because she loves The Simpsons. There's a whole episode where they do the stage production of The Simpsons, and I wouldn't allow her to watch that episode. Like, you can't watch that episode until you see A Streetcar Named Desire, otherwise you won't understand it. And so she's like, okay, can we just watch A Streetcar? And so we did. So I think now, as she's getting older and out, she's out in the world, and she comes across references to all these movies, and she'll be like the only kid, like the teacher will reference something, and she'll be the only kid in the class that knows what her teacher's talking about.
Yeah.
I think she really enjoys that. And it's like, no, I'm doing this for a reason. Like, watching these movies is really going to help you connect with people and kind of connect with the world way more. So there is value. I try to tell her there's a lot of value, cultural value, in watching these movies.
I saw the Streetcar episode when it first aired, and I didn't know Streetcar Named Desire yet. I knew The Godfather and The Wild One and all that stuff. I didn't know that one yet, because back then there was no internet. I couldn't have found out. And I would have been lucky to, turn on TNT or something and find the movie. But, I totally get it, And, I think you guys are pretty good together talking about movies. I mean, you and your husband should at least, start a new podcast where you talk about movies.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess if we're in lockdown again. Otherwise, I think we're just too busy.
Do you have a new book in mind you're going to do?
Yeah, I've actually been, for the last couple of years, I've been doing research. There used to be a place in Buena Park, not very far, called Movieland Wax Museum, and it was the other reason why I became such a fan of classic film. I went there when I was 5 years old, and it had opened in 1962, and so it had all of the golden age wax figures of the golden age film stars, and it was really well done. So it was, I don't know, I think it's different from any other wax museum I'd ever been in, and so it closed in 2005, and it was my favorite place in the whole wide world, and so I've just been doing research about the whole saga of Movieland, and I'm hoping maybe in 2024 I'll get that completed. So that is my next big project.
Oh, that is so awesome! Yeah, I mean, it's great that you made the public more conscious again of Van Vorik. I mean, I don't think that there's people out there who even remember who Marie Prevost was. I mean, she's the silent star who was allegedly eaten by her dogs.
Yeah, and that's what if people know who she is, that's usually it.
So, Mean, Moody, Magnificent, Jane Russell and the Marketing of Hollywood Legend is available on your website and Amazon?
Yeah, Amazon. I always encourage people, if you want to support independent bookstores, we have our incredible Larry Edmunds bookstore in Hollywood, on Hollywood Boulevard, and you can reach out to Jeff. And he might have some signed copies in stock, and if he doesn't, I live 10 minutes away from there, so I am more than happy to go down and autograph a copy for you if you order from Larry Edmunds.
Beautiful. Christina, thank you so much for coming on and having this great conversation. I hope that you and your family have a happy holiday season, and be safe out there.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. Christina Rice, ain't she a sweetheart? I just love how she's chronicling history of classic film, and she's passing it on to her daughter. That is so awesome. Yeah, if you want to go check out that pandemic project, Little Miss Movies, where her and her husband are talking to their daughter about movies that they just showed her for the first time and stuff. It's really funny, really cute. Go check it out on the podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, whatever. So until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes.